Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Limitless edX, where we dive into all things education. My name is Jeanette Easton, and I'm from Refound Education.
I'm Andrea Harris, and I am from Bloom at Home Learning. And we're super excited to talk to you today about the process to start homeschooling your child. And Jeanette is going to talk about the different forms of alternative education that are emerging, the different types, and we'll go into all the things that parents usually have questions about.
Absolutely. So, public school has been deteriorating at a rapid rate, and this year it is going to, I believe, get worse and worse. And we want parents to be informed about what their options are. So Andrea is going to dive in very shortly with all things homeschool, which I'm really excited to hear. And there are other learning models. So there are learning pods, which emerged about 4 years ago. And the ratio typically is a 1 to 5, 1 to 6 ratio. Learning pods can be in different places. So inside of a home, inside of a church, anywhere where children can be housed comfortably, sometimes even at a farm. So there's lots of different urban and rural options. There's also micro schools. So micro schools are essentially learning pods, but multiple. So you have about like a 2 to 10 ratio or a 3 to 15 plus. And then the next one would be private school. So a lot of people are starting to build up their numbers. They are gaining traction. They're starting to grow beyond what would be a micro school. So they are registering as uninspected private schools. And this allows for them to have bigger numbers if they so choose, and allows them to be very flexible in the types of learning modalities that they can teach and share, which is people are coming up with some pretty original kind of options, which we're going to dive into a little more later. And also there is supplemental. So part-time workshops, seminars, anything that is done on a short-term basis would be considered supplemental part-time. And there is so much more to dive into. But first, one major aspect of growth has been homeschooling. So
Homeschool.
take it away, Andrea.
Okay, so this is actually the number one question you get right now from parents who are frustrated with the public education system or the Catholic education system, and they want to withdraw their children. They don't know the process. So, process is actually fairly easy in Ontario. Most provinces are the exact same process. You do have to look it up locally. So before I give any advice, I always preface this by saying, parents, I encourage you, if you are thinking about homeschooling, to join HSLDA. So that's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And their memberships for homeschool parents range, I think it ranges between $180 to $220 for the whole year. And I do encourage this for all parents, regardless of their background or the number of children that they're homeschooling, or whether they want to do this temporarily or full time for the future and have no plans to return to the school system. This basically just covers your bottom legally, and they have all the up-to-date local information for where you are looking to homeschool. So, for example, in the United States, different states have different laws. So you can imagine how difficult it would be to stay on top of, over 50 different states with over 50 different legalities and changing policies and different rules that you have to follow with homeschooling. So that is why I encourage parents. That is the number one resource to make sure you are following all the legal avenues that you need to be able to do this. We should state as well that when you are pulling your children to homeschool, you do need to normally submit an intent to homeschool form that is you can access this from any school board. If you just type in the school board that your children belong to and the homeschool letter of intent, it should pop up. So for example, quite easy. I used to work in one of the largest school boards in Ontario. You could just Google it and it will pop up. Some homeschool associations say you don't need to. I would just do this to cover your own behind and make sure you're following all the processes that are outlined. However, for students or children that have never been registered at school before, you don't need to do this part. As far as I know, for if they're not registered at a school for kindergarten, it's not like you're withdrawing them to homeschool. So this would just be something that you want to check out what is legal at your local level. And the form is super easy to fill out. I just did it because they are due September 1st in most school boards. So you write the names of your children, their birth dates, and their gender, which they have just changed now to preferred gender, but you write your address and the school that they should be going to, and then you sign it. So that, and I always recommend parents keep a copy of that as well. And it's usually submitted by email. So you should also request email confirmation that they received it and save that for your own records. Um, Anything to add to that, Jeanette? So I'm not forgetting anything.
If you are met with any kind of resistance, or any kind of hostility, do not engage the school board. You call HSLDA right away. They will send all appropriate legal documentation to support and advocate on your behalf. They're really efficient. They've been around for a while, just like Andrea said. So don't hesitate to reach out to them. It is not their first rodeo, so they are they're very well equipped to do everything that needs to be done to make sure that you're well on your journey.
And truthfully, to ease parents' minds as well, there's usually no issue with withdrawing your children to homeschool. I did it without any backlash at all. Schools are super busy. I mean, they have bigger issues on their agenda for the school year. It would just be if there were a parent who were in a contentious issue with a school board, say, for example, they had some ongoing challenges, that would be a time where you may need assistance in just backing up your claims of why you want to homeschool. So that's the process. It's super easy. I've done it. I think parents sometimes think that the time it takes usually is a little bit longer, or the things that they have to cross off. But seriously, it's basically filling out a form. And then you get to the point of, oh my gosh, I'm homeschooling my kids. What do I do, Jeanette?
That sense of panic when you're
Yeah.
like, oh no, they're with me all the time now.
Yes.
But also that doesn't need to be the case. Um, so in terms of homeschooling as well, say you're not prepared to do it straight away 100%. There is an option where you can remove your child from public school for 1 day, 2 days, or the days as you see fit, which you can be met with some resistance too, mostly because it affects their funding. So, but what I have learned from a lot of parents who have tried pulling them out for um, maybe like 1 day on a Friday to put them in a farm school, or 2 days because they're doing like um, some therapy on 1 day and the farm school on the next. So however you decide to transition, whether it's you dive in both feet to homeschooling, or whether you are incorporating other options, there's a possibility to do that. So some of these micro schools, private schools have part-time options. So if you're homeschooling, but you're like, whoa, this is overwhelming, or like Andrea said, if you're doing it, part-time, you're starting to commit, maybe you're opened your own business, or maybe you're expanding your wings in other ways, and you need parenting needs a village, and homeschooling, you need a village too. So I think incorporating other options into your kids' learning is a great opportunity to expand their horizons. Because a lot of people say that, and yes, every parent is equipped to homeschool their kids, but I don't think everyone is fully equipped to teach everything. I
Mhm.
know people try and paint that picture, but even as educators, do we know everything?
I'm a big fan of outsourcing, Jeanette. So I do outsource where I need it. But I would like to also preface that and say that it does totally depend on your teacher and your administrator of the school, whether they are going to uh, be happy about withdrawing your child 1 or 2 days a week. I do know tons of families do that where they have their children in a forced school 1 day a week, or even honestly, when families that have their children in competitive sports, for example, hockey or skating or any of the really, really busy ones, especially ball season. Sometimes children are withdrawn every Friday or every Monday for tournaments. And there's not a whole lot that schools can do in terms of like you not being allowed. But I mean, there are teachers who can be more disgruntled than others about that, as well as administrators as well. It doesn't affect their funding until you withdraw your child fully to homeschool. And we didn't speak about that, but in Ontario, it schools do receive about, what is it, 14,000 around there. I don't know the current number for the 2024-25 school year, but it's about 14,000 a student, and more so with special needs. So if you are withdrawing your students to homeschool, say, for example, there's even, a pocket, say 10 kids out of one school, that can be significant for funding. So school boards eventually will start to really see homeschooling as a threat just because of their funding. But I mean, as we also see, homeschooling is becoming more popular because the school system is not meeting children's needs. So we can do a whole other podcast about that. Today is just walking you through the process and explaining different modalities. So Jeanette, did you want to talk about the different types?
Yes, so I had spoken pretty much about what they are, but on top of that, there are also very specific, like interest specific education programs. So some schools have a sports background, so they or an arts background,
Mhm.
or maybe a tech background. So whatever interests your child is into, there is a learning program that can support that, whether it's Waldorf, Montessori. It's an endless array of what you can incorporate. And, tying back to the outsourcing is a great idea because even, for example, myself, I know my young little guy he's very much into robotics and that kind of thing. And we've done it on a basic level. I don't want to give young children tech. And so their age, it's not favorable. Not that I discount it completely, but it's very, it's on the lesser side. Um, so we've made kind of little robots like a doodle bot or with like markers in a cup or very DIY kind of things. But once we get to a point where it's more advanced coding or more advanced, I'm going to have to bring in like outsource. So I would do workshops or that kind of thing to satisfy their needs. So even if you don't feel completely prepared, start your homeschooling journey with outsourcing to um, someone. Just
Mhm.
join in their journey. And they are going to be privatizing education. A lot of this deterioration is done for a reason. And, there's things that we can't control. At first, we were kind of like, oh no, but now it's like, oh yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about it. And 15 states I know have already given families the money, which is very reflective on the direction things are going to start going.
A
And
lot of states do give back money towards homeschool parents. However, I will say a word of caution because those who are like me, I withdrew my children for safety and protection, right? So any information that you do give the government, if the government's giving you money for something, um, I get it is so helpful to parents and families, but they do require some specific things from the government. So, for example, Florida has the Step Up Scholarship Program, and as far as I've read, you do have to participate in some of the conditions of receiving that scholarship money. So, for example, any type of state standardized testing might be required, or other different things that they may require. That's individual per state. They do not have that in Ontario yet. However, it's just something to consider for parents, whether they want to go that avenue or not. In terms of covering all your bases with curriculum, I love your suggestion to Jeanette to do specialized workshops or camps. Those are always available. And for my own personal journey, I was a teacher and I was overwhelmed. So, and I had taught both grades my daughters were going into when I first homeschooled 2 years ago. I just knew that I wanted them out of the system, quite frankly. I did not like the policies on the sliding scale of medical freedom, to be quite honest, because I never saw that as an issue in my 2 decades of teaching. No one ever cared about that before 2021. And it truthfully was very, very alarming as a parent. And that's why I withdrew my children. That was a major part of it, other than the different areas of concern we see every day in the school system. However, I did feel very strongly that I was not suited to teach my daughter French. At the time I withdrew my children, she had already had 1 year of French in school. I could totally teach the basic level French, as I'm sure we all could from our high school days, but I hadn't had any sort of French class, not even in university. So I decided to outsource that. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I made. I found a fully aligned teacher who was offering group classes for homeschool students. So it was super reasonable. It wasn't like I was paying for private tutoring because it was a group class. And it was taught by a French immersion teacher. And I am telling you, the amount of things that you can teach that your children retain in such a short amount of time when there are less students is astounding. It's actually mind blowing. I don't think parents or teachers fully grasp. Teachers do grasp because we used to joke about it all the time. Oh my goodness, could you imagine if I could just teach a small group of students what we could accomplish in a school year? Because as we all know, you teach to the lowest child. And that is not saying anything derogatory or negative. It's not a judgment. It's just reality. If you have a student that's very, very hands-on and needy and a runner and maybe nonverbal, or that's not to say it's all special needs students, but if you have a child at the back of the room who throws desks, you're going to focus your attention on ensuring that child is happy and excited to learn and safe. And oftentimes, gifted independent workers get overlooked. I'm not going to say workers, but independent working children are overlooked in the school system. So that is just something to note as well. In terms of what you have to cover for curriculum, in Ontario, you get to choose whatever you want. There is no guidelines of what you have to teach, although we do have the Ontario curriculum. I followed that as a homeschooling parent just because I have the philosophy that although my children are at home learning with me, I still want them to be able to read and write and do math to be able to function in society. Not that I don't believe in other subjects, I totally do. But in terms of art, I would rather outsource an art class once a week or do sports instead of covering everything myself. It can be really exhausting, and you have to know where your time is worth more. So I did outsource French, and it was honestly, Jeanette, she was speaking like French immersion level French because she was in a small homeschool group of the first year was 4 students, and it's now up to 5. I think her teacher this year has even more joining. So it was just unbelievable how 2 hours a week could increase her level that much. So really worth
Abs-
thought.
Oh, absolutely. When you don't have an army of children, and my background's mental health, and just it's impossible. Like people will throw nice words like inclusion and that kind of thing, but a lot of
Mhm.
it's sink or swim. You can't throw
Yeah.
children with behavioral needs, mental health needs into these rooms and not provide a proper foundation. Like a home, it's going to come crashing because the foundation isn't there.
Mhm.
And, I do recommend with the staffing issues that are going to be presenting, there are going to be staffing shortages. What does that mean? It means that children are going to be put in rooms, larger rooms with larger groups of kids with various needs and packets for learning. And that's not going to go over well.
No,
The children do not have the discipline to sit for all day, the entire school day. Adults don't have the discipline to do that.
no,
So
we don't.
I don't, that's for sure. I used to make my lessons like 15 minutes. If it's more than 15 minutes, I'm talking too much. Um,
Absolutely. You lose their attention, right? The rule of thumb, sorry to interject, Jenna.
no,
The
no,
rule of
please.
thumb is usually the number of minutes of an attention span is the child's age. So if you're thinking 4 or 5 year olds in kindergarten, if your lessons are longer than 5 minutes, they're gone. They're rolling on the carpet. They're picking at the Lego that they found out of the desk close to them. They're tracing your shoes, and that is no fault of their own. That is their developmental age. So yes, absolutely, you can increase it,
Mm.
and it would be much easier to do in a class or your home with less distractions. But I think that's a really good point on what you touched on. And if you're okay, if I talk about the staffing shortage in a very short blip too, I think that's really important to focus on.
Oh, absolutely. Please, please do.
Okay, so I think sometimes this is well known in the teaching arena. Every single teacher knows it. Every single ECE, every single educational assistant, single administrator. So just have a conversation with any single person that you know in education. And this has been an issue for far, far longer than 2020. This was an issue, I mean, 7, 8 years ago, teachers would talk about this is that there weren't enough supply teachers on the list to cover certain things. So usually like the first couple weeks in September are okay because there's no teachers really taking sick days. But once you hit after Thanksgiving is when illnesses start, is when usually people start booking appointments. There's things that can come up. However, if you have even a PD workshop, for example, in the school board I taught at, if they had a popular primary workshop, say they were doing training on some kind of literacy or math, and a lot of teachers were going to that, you would have to book your supply teacher so far in advance because there would just be nobody to cover. So fast forward 5 years from however long ago, and we're into 2020 and 2021. There were not a lot of supply teachers to take over when we were online learning. So a lot of the time, what teachers would do they would be told by the school board, you need to provide independent learning for that appointment, because there just weren't enough trained teachers. A lot of the times you get the primary teachers, and I'm not going to say all primary teachers because there's junior and intermediate, but primary are like really attached to their children in their class. So they would always feel badly and leave extensive planning and not take off if they knew that there was going to be no supply teacher. But sometimes it's inevitable. So we were at the stage years ago where the boards were making a surplus of money because they weren't paying out supply teachers their wages each day because there weren't enough. And then you have support staff in the school, for example, the learning support teachers, which we call LSTs. You have ESL teachers, you have the librarian, you have different kinds of prep teachers that would run around and fill all these different pockets. So for example, if there was, just off the top of my head, there's a grade 5 teacher who didn't get her job covered that day. Absolutely no fault to the teacher. I'm going to preface it and say you cannot control sickness, especially um, teachers that are parents with sick kids too. So oftentimes it comes up later in the evening, or maybe somebody got a fever in the middle of the night. So they didn't put their job in early enough, and you see your job's not picked up that day. There are definitely deficits in the system. So there would be maybe a VP filling in for that grade 5 class. Maybe the French teacher would come in, and it's a ricochet because then the French teacher has to go to all her classes and say, I can't cover you. There's no French today. So I think
Or
parents
the
really
spec
don't.
ed teachers who
Yeah,
never actually taught spec ed, no IEP meetings are so things are
yeah,
going to deteriorate, but on a note, so
yeah.
they don't always call out the supply teachers. They don't always put in the jobs or put the call outs. I
Hmm.
think it's to save money so that the board doesn't have to pay because they're in such a deficit because of poor money management. And
Hmm.
we could dive into that in a whole new episode. But I do think it's going to deteriorate to the point where it is unmanageable. And I do think parents are going to be at home with their kids again more than expected.
Definitely. I totally agree. If anyone's paying attention to the news, and I will say X is right now a really good source for this, you could follow teachers on there. Or, like, I mean, they're all anonymous, right? Because they can't use their name or they'll be fired by the school board. But
Can
here's
they though?
support.
Can they really afford to fire anyone?
Oh, they did fire a whole bunch in 2021. So
They might have been.
we won't go there, but some school boards did, others did not. But there was a report in April that the Windsor Essex Board was telling teachers to wear sweaters because they were keeping the temperature low. I don't even know. I didn't look into that, but I do know that there's such a deficit. I think you know what, there were articles in the mainstream media about how in debt some school boards are. Like the TVDSB in London was, I think, 18 million in debt last school year, so they're already starting at a deficit. If I don't personally know of any instance where a supply teacher was not called out, because I worked in a very large, very high need school, and every instance in that case, they needed somebody. But there were days where during flu season, wait, we don't have flu anymore, but during the winter months when people got sick regularly, what used to be known as the flu, they would have three teachers short every single day. So it's a crisis. I'm just going to say that.
Oh, yeah, especially with the little ones and their foot mouth
Yeah,
and
we
all the
have
things.
really unsuited teachers teaching very young classes. Even when my daughter was in grade one, there was the VP who was taking over, and the VP had no experience in kindergarten ever, and he was teaching a kindergarten gym class, and there were they have little bladders, right? So when they say I have to go to the bathroom, and you say, okay, you can hold it, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but if you're doing like running, like 30 minutes is a very long time. And this is a little point of mine. I think it's inhumane to tell children they can't go to the bathroom when they want. But there were three accidents that day. All three of those kids, including my daughter, peed their pants, and they're mortified because they're kids who don't normally have accidents. So when I brought it up, I don't know, they gave me the excuse he was busy with a nosebleed or something like that for apparently 30 minutes, the whole gym class. But I'm just saying it happens very often, and it's absolutely a detriment to the students in the class if somebody who is very unskilled or inexperienced in that grade comes in.
Yeah, I had seen there was a news article about a school that was dedicated mainly to neurodivergent kids, and they lost half of their support staff.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And
That's
parents
not even
moved in the area, like they moved to a different location to have access to resources that
absolutely.
are being cut very aggressively. But the problem is too, it's become so volatile in terms of the politics, the agendas, that educators, especially the ones that can deliver, don't want to work in those environments anyways. They are
Absolutely.
building higher quality resources. And to those that are homeschooling that might need support, or to those that are thinking about it and want to start maybe with one day, look now. Don't wait for everything to fall apart before you do your research. Please be sure to check out www.refounded, refounded.ca, or at Refound Education on Instagram is the most developed option. But we're also on Snapchat, Facebook, all the social medias. But definitely start creeping and checking out all the new schools and education options that are starting to emerge. And go for one day, go for a tour, take a look at what your options are so you have a backup plan. Call Andrea. She has so many options so that if we have, once there's enough of a need and parents are expressing those needs, then people can start developing and working the programs according to the needs of the community and group that need the resources. So
I
put
think it's a really good point.
yeah, put your
Awesome.
asks into the universe so that we can every the educators that are kind of diving out onto their own so we can respond accordingly and try and be there for your families and your children as you need us.
That is absolutely my number one piece of advice right now, Jeanette, to parents who are inquiring is just to get your ducks in a row. Be proactive. Being proactive actually will decrease your anxiety and your levels of stress once things go awry, right? When they go sideways, you're going to be in the mix of being already stressed and overwhelmed and not knowing where to turn. And that's when we're often reactive and we don't make the best decisions. So right now is a great time to start investigating different options, start to pre-plan what would happen if schools were shut down. What do I do in this case? What do I do if different mandates are brought back? What do I do in this case? How does my family feel? Do I have family members that can jump in? It's a really, really great idea. And I highly stress to everyone, now is the time to plan. And this is not putting fear in anyone. I am not fearful, but I was very worried about the direction that we were headed in 2021, 2022, hence my resignation and choice to homeschool my children. But now that I am doing it, it is ease, right? You just want ease, simplicity. You want to remove yourself from the chaos. And we know if we know chaos is coming, it's never a better time to just have some options and go and investigate. I think Refound Ed is going to be a great platform because you are all over Canada and have lots of different ideas and various options for parents, whereas I usually refer them to you if they are looking in certain areas that I am unfamiliar with.
Absolutely. Like there's so many people out here that are ready to support you. The number one issue is funding, but like I said, start with one thing, one day. A drop-in day can range anywhere from $25 to $110, kind of, depending on what resources you need, what professionals there are. And unfortunately, resources for neurodivergent kids are at a higher price point, which we are going to need to address in the future. And
Mhm.
even though it's going to be a very messy transition, I am insanely optimistic about the direction everything is going to go. And I think
I
we're
am as well.
iron, right? I think we're gonna iron it out. I think we'll figure it out. There's so many, the intellectual like pool of amazing humans, and not all educators. Some are teach in different contexts or support staff, and there's so many people with so much value. And we need to improve the state of affairs. Even like support staff are paid poverty. That's not okay to work in environments that are very chaotic and
Absolutely. I
you know
agree. We could do a whole podcast episode on educational assistance. I actually think we should. Like, we could have some guest speakers on, and, like, oh my goodness, they are amazing humans and they are overworked and definitely are underpaid. So that would be a whole episode. But to leave off on a very positive note, I absolutely think parents can homeschool themselves. There are so many different options available out there. There's so much help out there as well. And I want to really stress to parents, you're not locked in to any type of learning that you choose. So if you decide to homeschool and want to try a forest school or want to try a part-time learning pod option, or you just want to do it yourself and you're unsure about the curriculum to choose, you don't have to follow it. If it doesn't work for you in a couple weeks or a month, you can tweak things along the way. That is the best part about educating your child at home or quote unquote homeschooling is that you have the freedom of choice and you can individualize their learning and choose what works best for your family. And if things change, you can tweak it. And if you don't like the learning time of the day, you can change it. It's all about freedom. And I think that is what we really need to focus on is that you will gain so much freedom as a parent, as do the children as well. It's just the really big leap into the discomfort of the unknown because we're not used to it. And please understand that Jeanette and I and all of the educators that we surround ourselves with are all in that same position. We've all chosen this discomfort and are trying something new. So I want to really empower parents to know that it is such a positive thing. And if you are uncertain, we are here to help.
Yes, thank you everyone for listening. And I love everything Andrea was sharing. It is an evolution and it is not a prison sentence. You move and flow like water until you find your flow. And so thank you everyone for listening. And we hope you have a beautiful learning journey with your families. See you soon or talk soon.